It's day one of the furniture flipping challenge. A few times a year over on Instagram, I host a furniture flipping challenge. So I just invite fellow furniture refinishers to come and flip a piece with me. I put us all in a group chat and we get to know each other about 2 weeks before the challenge begins. It's a great way just to get to know other people within the furniture refinishing business. So the way the challenge works is I pick a theme, which in this case is old world opulence. And then everybody chooses a piece of however they want to interpret that theme, and then they have 2 weeks to flip their piece. At the end of the 2 weeks, I pick my top 3, and then I had people come to my stories the following Monday to vote for their favorite. So for this video, I'm going to show you the piece that I flipped for the challenge. And then towards the end, I'm going to show you all of the before and afters, the top 3, and then the first place is going to have a longer feature at the end. So it's going to be a really fun video. Let's go.
So here's the piece that I'm going to be doing for the challenge. The story behind it is I had this piece that I turned into this piece. And a gentleman contacted me and wanted to trade for it. So he wanted to pay half cash and half furniture, which I normally don't do. But he sent me a picture of this. And I was like, okay, I might be interested. And so then he said he sent me a picture of this. The problem is it had veneer damage on the top. So I said, well, what else do you have? So we threw in this one too. So he paid half with cash, and then we traded the other half in furniture. So I flipped those 2 pieces. You can see I was able to fix the damage, painted out the dresser, but the bar cabinet has sat in storage for over 2 years. I just didn't know what to do with it. I felt like, I was kind of starting out right when I got this piece, a little bit above my skill level, but I've kind of leveled up on my skills. I still have a lot to learn, but I thought now is the time. For this challenge, it's old world opulence. I thought this piece fit perfect. You can see it has a lot of veneer damage, but that wood is beautiful. The veneer on the drawers. And so I hate the hardware. It's terrible, but I love everything else about it. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep the mirror or not. I follow some people over in Great Britain that do a lot of these. I believe this is probably an English bar cabinet. And so I got some inspiration from them, but I'm just going to go ahead and strip it, see what I'm dealing with, how I'm going to handle the missing veneer, and kind of get a design plan, and then I'll go from there. So I'm going to start by taking all of the hardware off. On vintage pieces, I know it can be difficult to get things reattached, but to really get a good finish, I like to take everything off. It really helps to record it too, because at the very end I had to come back to my videos to remember, okay, how in the world does this thing go back together? So I like to give it a really good clean. Sometimes I change out the screws because sometimes these have been stripped or something like that. But if possible, I'd like to try to label my hardware so I can at least get the hinges back on the right drawer. So you can see on this one, I'm going to label it bottom right. It's the bottom part of the mechanism that comes down. Then I can reattach the hinge to the right drawer. So I took all of the hardware off. I do think it's original. When I took off the really big pulls, it said England on the back. So I do believe it's an English antique. The guy who I traded with, he is a house flipper. So it was just left in a house. So he doesn't know anything about it, but I love it. I'm going to give it a really good clean. I got these really cool nylon brushes that you can attach to a drill, and it really helps get into some of the nooks and crannies. You can see I had a really small one that can get into the little tiny areas. And then I'm just going to go ahead and start stripping it. I'm using Green Ease. This is a non-toxic stripper I've used on a few pieces now, and I've been really impressed with it. I'm going to go ahead and cover it with some plastic wrap. It's really hot outside. I don't want it drying too quickly, so I'm just going to go ahead and apply the stripper, put some plastic over it, let it kind of work on that finish, and then I'll come back and scrape it off. I'm using my Carbide scraper. I'm going very, very gentle. These can gouge wood very easily, so you have to be very careful when you use them. Make sure you keep them straight, don't angle them, and that will help you not to gouge the wood. Also, make sure that you sharpen the blades really well. So I have a sharpener every single time I use it. When I clean it to put it away, I resharpen it. That way I make sure that the blade is sharp, and that helps me also prevent any gouging. I like to use either lacquer thinner or acetone after as a wash, and then I just kind of wipe it off with a paper towel, and then I'll use a little bit more of the solvent, and then I'll use a very fine steel wool, and I'll go in and try to get any more of that finish off if possible. Now I'm just going to work my way around the entire cabinet, getting all of that finish off, all the sides and the top, the drawers and the doors as well. So if you remember, there was a lot of veneer damage on the base, and so I see it's just like a quarter round molding that's attached to the base, and that's where all the damage was. So I decided I'm going to remove it and just see what it looks like. And so I was able to easily, it was just held on with some glue and some little nails. So I was able to get it pried off, and honestly, it looked really good. I thought it kind of made it look a little bit more of a clean line look. So I thought I might replace it, but I may just leave it off. So for all of the side pieces, I'm just going to go ahead and take all of these little pieces off. So now I'm going to go ahead and start with this sanding process. I'm going to start with 120 because I was able to get so much off. I don't need to go down to 80. I can go to 120. So I'm just going to sand through the grits. I'll do it 120. I'll go up to 180. I'm hand sanding the really highly figured parts of the veneer because this is really beautiful wood. I do not want to burn through any veneer. So I'm just going to go really gentle and just be careful. On the frames, I can go ahead and use my hand sander. Again, I'm using 120, just getting off as much as I can. The middle part it was a different kind of wood, and so I did strip it, and then I'm coming through with my pocket scraper, just getting as much of that finish off as I can. I'm not sure if I'm going to paint that or not, but I am at least going to go ahead and strip it. You can see that this veneer on the sides, there was some type of a faux finish on it. So some type of a decorative painting, and it's just coming right off. And this veneer is definitely not as pretty. So I'm not as concerned if I'm going to go ahead and paint this or not. It's not as pretty. And so it's not like the top or the sides or the doors. It's just a very thin, very more of a functional veneer. I'm going to use some Quickwood epoxy just to fill in a few spots that have a little bit of chipped veneer. So it's just a two-part epoxy. You just pull off the amount that you need, and then you just mix it together until it's a uniform color. I'm just going to use a little bit of painter's tape and just kind of mask off the area around it so that I don't get any of the epoxy around it. And then I'm just going to fill in the area that I need. I'll leave it a little bit proud just so that I can sand it back after it's done drying. I had this little chunk missing on one of the doors, so I'm going to do the same thing. Just going to tape it off, going to add a little bit of epoxy, kind of recreate that corner. I'll use my blend all sticks later to blend it into the surrounding finish. So when I pulled up my tape, it pulled up a piece of veneer that was next to it. So you have to be really careful with these really old pieces. So maybe taping it down wasn't my best decision. Usually it works fine, but on this piece, I ended up having to fill in that area, and then I did have to glue some areas down. Then I had to grab that little piece of veneer and glue it down. Now, obviously, once it was done, you can't even tell, but thankfully I have it, and so I can glue it back down. After the epoxy, I had a little bit more area that needed to be filled in, so I'm just going to use some natural wood filler to add some additional layering there. So I am going to change the hardware. So in order to do that, I need to go ahead and fill in the holes. I don't like to use Bondo necessarily. I feel like the wood dowels does a better job of filling in those holes. So I'm just going to use a little bit of, you don't see, I'm just use a little bit of wood glue, a little bit of wood filler, and then once it sets up, I'm going to use a flush cut saw, and then I'm just going to saw off the dowels. Now I'm going to clean it off, kind of get an idea of what the color is going to be, and then I'm using just a dye stain, and I'm going to stain those dowels ahead of time just to kind of make them match the wood a little bit better. This is the drawer that kind of pulls down. So I'm going to fill in these as well because I'm just going to move them over just a little bit. But it's enough that I need to fill in those holes. You can see I'm using the light brown dye stain. I'm just going to kind of prep it a little bit so that I can get it closer to the surrounding wood. So I'm going to go ahead and use my sander on the side. It's a little thicker veneer, so I'm not as concerned about burning through that. So I was able to start with 120. Again, I'm just going to go over it, and then I'll go up to 180, and I'll just stop and decide how I'm going to finish it. Some of the finish when I was stripping it had gotten underneath the mirror, so I decided, you know what, I'm just going to take it off. It's just held on with some trim that just has like little tack nails in it, so I'm just going to go ahead and take it out, make sure I get it really clean underneath there, and then I'm going to decide what I'm going to do with it. I decided to paint some of the trim, so I'm going to mask off the wood that I'm not painting. I'm going to use a shellac, and I'm just going to go over it and prime it first.
Did a poll on all of my socials. I got really great feedback. The consensus was, it was kind of split between the midnight blue and the coal black, but basically the consensus was, if you're selling it, go black. If you're keeping it, go blue. And so I would agree with that. I noticed black sells really well. It was tough because they're both colors. Both of those colors are in the wallpaper. I was really leaning towards the black, but that blue, oh, it was so beautiful. And then I got a message from one of my sweet friends, Barbara from Second Indulgence. I think she's done every one of my challenges, but she messaged me and she said, what about mixing them? I'd never even considered it. So I decided, okay, I'm gonna do a sample board. I said, you're brilliant, Barbara. And so I went ahead and did a sample board with the midnight blue and the coal black, and then I did 50-50 mixture of them together. And it's a beautiful tone. It's a black, but it's not so intense. It's got that beautiful blue undertone that I was looking for without being blue. And so it's a blackish blue. And so I just think it's beautiful. So let's go.
I do like using the de-wax shellac as my primer under a dark color, because if I use a white primer, it's kind of hard to cover up. And so if I'm using a dark color, I like to use kind of a clear primer or a tinted primer. And Fusion plays nicely with shellac. I know some of the other paints I've used don't play nicely with shellac, but Fusion does really well with a shellac-based primer. I'm using my Erlex 5700. It's a small turbine sprayer, and this is what it looks like after one coat. I'll let it dry for about 4 hours, give it a nice little scuff sand, tack cloth it off, and then I'll go back through and do a second coat.
So yesterday was a bit of a disaster. I oiled my drawers. Well, I gilded them first with a newer to me product, and I pinstriped them. And so a lot of detail work, took me a couple hours, and then I let it dry almost 24 hours, and then I put my hard wax oil over that. Well, you put your hard wax oil down and then you wipe off the excess. Well, when I started wiping off the excess, it was taking off all the gilding. So I was grabbing my mineral spirits really quickly, pulled it all off, all that work. So what I should have done is I should have oiled them first and then put the wax on top of that. Because, and I think if I had been using a finish, like let's say I decided just to spray them with like a polyurethane, wouldn't have been an issue. It was the wiping off the excess that caused it to wipe right off. So if I had thought about it, you know, I don't know, sometimes you do things and I don't know. I've used other products before. Posh Chalk Interiors is what I normally use. Posh Chalk pigments and their Infuser is what I normally use, and the wax goes over that easily. So that was kind of a mess, but they're re-oiled, 2-coat. Tomorrow I'll probably go ahead and re-pinstripe them, but let me show you where I'm at.
So now that I have some of the paint done, I'm ready to go ahead and oil all of the wood components. So I am using Osmo's Poly-X oil. This is in satin. I like to apply it. You can apply it many different ways, but it's really nice to use it with this white applicator, or you could use a thin nap roller. You can use a brush. Certain applicators lay down a little bit more product, which just gives you a more durable finish. And so once you apply it, you let it set a little bit, and then you're just going to wipe off the excess with a lint-free rag. I like to do at least 2 coats. Sometimes I'll do a 3rd coat on the top of a dresser, or in this case, the top of the cabinet. I decided to go ahead and paint out the trim to match the rest of the body as well. Here's some of the repairs that I did earlier. Once I have it oiled, then I know what color I need to match to. And so I have 1 coat of oil down, and I'm just going to go ahead. These are a waxy crayon type of material, so it goes well over the oil that I put down. So now I have the color. I'm just going to continue to build the color until I match the surrounding wood, and then I will seal it with a vinyl sealer, and then I'll come back and do my final coat of oil. For the hardware, I like to soak everything in a mixture of boiled water and vinegar, and then I'll come back with some Barkeeper's Friend and a very fine steel wool, and I'll get everything polished up. If it doesn't polish up well, then I'll just respray it with some gold spray paint. Here's how I'm doing my gilding. I'm using Posh Chalk pigments. I'm using pale gold and lemon gold, and then I mix it with their infuser. So it's basically like you're just mixing up beautiful liquid gold. And so you can use, see, I'm just kind of mixing it. I don't have a specific ratio. I'm just kind of playing it by ear. And then I use these really cool artist brushes, and I use a very, very fine painter's tape. I put it along the edge. Then I bring another piece of tape and I put it alongside that. And then once that's attached, then I pull up the first one, and that is creating a little channel for me. I do that all the way around the actual drawer, whatever I'm actually gilding. And then I come back with a putty knife, and I'm going to trim off those little edges. You can see I'm basically creating a little pinstripe. Then I like to take some painter tape and go around the perimeter of the entire drawer, and that creates my little stripe. And then I'm just simply going to paint that in with my gilding. Now, if you pull your tape back and you have any little problems, you can just simply go back with a little bit of mineral spirits. That'll take it off real quickly, and then just retape it and then just re-gild real quick. So it's very forgiving. Just make sure that you make any corrections right away. So now I'm ready to do the wallpaper. So this is a Rifle Paper Company wallpaper. It's a peel and stick. It's vinyl. I felt with it being vinyl, it would be a little bit more durable since it might be exposed to heat or moisture. I am going to seal it, but I thought it would be a good foundation for this particular application. So I found my center. I'm going to use a few little toothpicks over on the side because that's where I'm going to have my screw holes for where I attach the mechanism that pulls the door down. I want to kind of mark that area so that I can screw that in later. When I laid out the design, I want it to be one continuous design. So I had to make sure that I had it cut in such a way that when you see the back of it, it just is a seamless design all the way to the drop-down drawer. I'm going to use my tape measure to get some rough estimates. I've also used my laser level and I've marked the very center of the back of the cabinet. Now, when you're putting wallpaper on, I find it the best if you just don't have a lot of excess fabric. Especially this area, it's really hard to get it in there. You can see I'm just trying to kind of put it in there, do a little dry fit, make some adjustments. I'm going to cut off a little bit more on the sides, makes it a little bit more manageable. I'm going to go ahead and put it in and get a really precise area of where I want to make my cut, because I want to make a really precise cut where the wallpaper is going to be attached to the drop down drawer. Now it's just a matter of peeling it back and getting it adhered. I'm just smoothing it out with my hands first, being very gentle, and then I'm using a wallpaper spreader just to get out any kind of bubbles, and I'll use my X-Acto knife to trim the sides. I'm making sure that my pattern is aligned because initially I had it upside down. I need to make sure that it's a continuous pattern. But before I put my wallpaper on, I actually need to put my hardware on first. So I'm just going to make my cut, but then I'm going to pause and put my hardware on. So for the hardware, I had to be really careful because just like the other hardware, I had the dowels in there. I was going over just a little bit, but I wanted to make sure that it went in correctly. I want to make sure it's exactly centered. And so you can see I kind of use a variety of tools. I have a cabinet jig that I should have just used on this, but I just kind of dither back and forth. I just want to make sure it's perfect because I don't want to drill holes and it not be perfect. So after a lot of measuring, I got it right. And now I was ready to actually go ahead and adhere the wallpaper. I decided to go ahead and attach it to the cabinet. That way I can make sure that that wallpaper is seamlessly lined up. I'm using a long razor blade, kind of at an angle, and it easily trims the wallpaper. Again, I'll do a very light sand, then I'll come in and touch that up. So everything was going really well until I went to try to shut it. It didn't shut, and you can see it didn't open. So I had some major problems. Obviously it can look really good, but it's got to function too. So here's what happened.
So I'm at a point where the little things are usually the hardest and give me the most headache. It's been a rough day. I went to put the hardware on, and the hardware is just slightly off where the old holes were. So when I went to drill in, one of them was going to go in the existing hole and the other one just slightly over. Well, I had put wooden dowels in there, but my drill bit kind of went into that softer wood and went over. So it didn't work. I had to re-plug the hole, try to move it. It was a mess, but I got it. Took about 30 minutes to do one pull. The other side went a little better, and then I started to put the mechanism together where you pull it down, and it didn't fit. And so that's the thing with vintage hardware. Sometimes when you take things off and then you paint them and you're adding mill to it, because you're adding product to it, paint on paint, the adjustment of the humidity, sometimes things just don't work. So I was attaching the side, one of the side hinges, thought I saw one of the screw holes, screwed it in, broke the screw off, made a mess trying to get it out. Wasn't even the right nail screw hole. So it's been a day, but I have sanded down the portion where the drawer is, and now it's moving freely. But I don't really want to add paint back to it because I'm adding product. So I think what I'm going to do is around the sides, I'm just going to stain it. Now I oiled all the doors, but this is a different wood. So it's going to need a little bit of color. So I'm going to find a stain or some either like a dye stain or a gel stain, and I'm just going to stain that area because it'll be a very less mils. You know, when I say mils, I mean it's going to be less thick because I'm using Fusion. Fusion's thick, so it's several mils, and so I want to use as thin of a consistency as possible. So I'll only have to do one coat of stain, and then I'll just do the sealer on top of that. So it'll be a lot thinner. So it should also, with having paint on poly or paint on wax, it should still let that mechanism go freely, because paint on paint, it was just not coming. So anyway, I say all that to say, making progress, had to pivot a few times, but it's coming.
So I decided to remove the paint from the doors as well. So I had painted all of the edges. So I decided I'm just going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to sand all the paint off, and I will just use the stain on those as well. That way the doors will open and close easily as well. And I thought things were going better until I tried to do the top coat. Then I ran into some problems again.
Well, I have some sad news. I was kind of done with the bar cabinet, and then I went to seal it because I felt like, it needed extra sealer. And so the strongest sealer I felt like I had was Wipe On Poly. I hate Wipe On Poly. It's too shiny, and it went on blotchy. So I'm sanding back all of the black paint, and I am repainting it, just a real thin coat. And then I'm going to go over it with, I have a oil-based matte by Minwax that I'm going to use and spray it on, not wipe it on, and do a couple rounds of that. And then in the midst of taking it apart, I messed up the wallpaper too. And I'm having to redo some of the wallpaper. So God bless me. So in hindsight, I should have just used the oil-based sealer right away, but I honestly thought, wipe on will be easy. I don't have to mask off any of the wood. I should have just masked off the wood. It would have been a lot easier and a lot less time. So I was going to have the video out this week, but I messed it up. So I'm going to have to tweak it and redo it. But that is just real life. And so very frustrated with myself, but I mean, it's a small tweak, but yet it's enough to where I took off all Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. My husband was off for the 4th of July, so I didn't work on it at all. And I'm having to reorder the wallpaper on Etsy from Spoonflower. So that's not going to get here until probably either the end of the week or next week. So it's just on hold. Boo. After my disaster yesterday, let me at least show you where I'm at today. So I'm back down to bare bones on the bar cabinet. There was a tiny little error in the corner, but you know, I want to sell this and I want to sell it well. So sometimes you have to be really, really picky. So I pulled the whole thing out. I also pulled out one of the areas. Let me show you what happened on this one. So there was see this right here? I had some overspray or a drip, and then I tried to get it off and it started to take off the pattern. So I decided just to take the whole thing off. So sometimes you make a decision just because, well, that's what you want to do. You want it to be as best as it could. So thankfully the doors are okay. The tops are okay. It's just really all I'm doing is replacing the wallpaper now.
Since I was going to repaint everything, I decided I'm going to fill in all these little nail holes. They were kind of bothering me. So I filled those in. I'm doing a light coat of black paint, and then I'll be able to come back and do a re-top coat with the matte color. After about a week, the new wallpaper came in. Now, obviously, it went in a lot faster, so I was able to use the other pieces as a template. So it honestly went a little bit easier. I was able to make a couple adjustments as well. When you shut the drop-down door, you could see the wallpaper. So this time, I cut it just a little bit shorter. That way, when the drawer is closed, you can't see it. So sometimes, being able to do something over again, you actually do it better the second time. So in this particular case, things went a little bit smoother. Now I'm finally ready to re-top coat. I am using Min Wax. This is their fast drying polyurethane in a warm flat. I ended up doing 3 coats on it, and I think it's going to be a really beautiful finish. Are you ready to look back at the before? Here we go. Man, this was quite a journey. Started with a lot of veneer damage. I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do with it in the beginning. Horrible hardware, a lot of damage along the base, but gosh, so much potential. The wood is just stunning. So it didn't need a lot. The wood just needed to strip it and oiled it, but a lot of decisions to make. I know I didn't keep everything wood, but I really love kind of making this a very special kind of a wow piece. So after all of that work and a lot of decisions and some setbacks, here is the finished product. What do you think? I love it. I do. That wallpaper is stunning. I know I painted. I know when you first saw it, you think, oh my gosh, she painted so much. But really, once everything is closed up, it's really more of an accent. And I really love the bluey black. It's not just a real stark black. It has that really beautiful blue undertone. Isn't the matte polyurethane really beautiful? And then just simply oiling the wood is just stunning. It just didn't need much. So here you can see I open it freely. Nothing sticks. Everything works. I mean, it can be beautiful, but at the end of the day, it needs to work. And so I love the wallpaper. I think it's rather period specific to the piece. I was able to jazz up all of the gold. I actually like the hardware. I know some people might think it's a little too modern, but you got to remember this is going to be in a modern, in today's home, somebody's home today. So it needs to work for today's home as well. So I think it's a nod to the wallpaper with a geometric, but yet I think it's a really beautiful update as well. So let's nitpick a little bit. The only thing I'm still working on, because things aren't ever 100%, is there's just this tiny little gap right there. I'm going to shore that up. There's a repair on the side. I'm going to see if I can fill that in a little bit more. One of the drawers sticks just a little bit. I'm going to fix that. So there's just little things, it's probably 100 years old. Is it going to be perfect? Probably not. But man, I'm going to try to make it as perfect as I can. But man, can you believe that shine? All that gilding, absolutely beautiful, subtle, but beautiful. I'm not real big into like a lot of tape designs, but I love the simplicity of a pinstripe in the gold. So what do you think? Do you like it? I love it. What do you think I should list it for? I'm going to list it on Etsy. I'm going to list it on my business page on Facebook and on my local marketplace. But I have a friend who thinks I should ask $2,000 for it. Do you think I should? You think that's too much? I think it's pretty amazing. It's definitely a stunning piece, but I want to know, what do you think? Enjoy a few of these videos and I'll be right back.
So now that I've shown you my piece, let's move on into the challenge portion of the video. Now this challenge was all done on Instagram, so I'm going to take you through the beginning reel of when I was advertising it. I'll show you the before and afters. I'll show you the top 3, who won, and then I'm going to feature at the very end the winner of the challenge. Enjoy. The Ivy Lane Furniture Challenge starts next month. The theme is Old World Opulence. What does that mean? Let me show you. This is from Forrest Glover Designs. These are the fall trends of 2025. You'll see they say Old World Opulence. Think Versailles without the wigs and the fanfare. They talk about furniture that screams, beautiful ornate moldings. You see how rich and everything is. It doesn't necessarily have to mean woods. It could be also Gustavian, which is kind of that Swedish look where you have some layering and you have gilding, but definitely fancy. Registration closes this Friday, the 31st. You'll have 2 weeks to complete the piece. The top 3 win prizes, and then the first place will also be featured on my YouTube channel. I'll put everybody on a group chat. One of the reasons I do this is for community. So message me if you want to join. We would love to have you. The Old World Opulence Furniture Challenge is done. It's time to pick the top 3. But before we do, let's take a look back at all the before and afters. Here's the top 3. I need you to come to my stories tomorrow morning starting at 7 a.m. Central Standard Time to vote for your favorite. So come cast your vote on Monday morning.
And the winner is Darlene from A Gleam Designs Co. A little bit about our piece. She said it's from the late 1800s. It was in good shape considering its age. It did have some scuffs along the feet and along the edges. The top had many scratches. She started by thoroughly cleaning it out. The insides of the drawers were in amazing condition, so all she needed was some wood conditioner for those. She carefully stripped the piece with clean strip, choosing to not use a carbide scraper, given the age that it might have a lead-based stain or a top coat on it. She tried to sand out the original scuffs and scratches the best she could. She said they weren't all able to be removed, but she's embracing the history of the piece. She applied 2 coats of clear shellac before staining. Once it was dry, she covered the entire piece with 1 coat of Varathane's Kona gel. Once it dry, she sanded it with 220. Then she applied Minwax wipe-on polyurethane, waiting 6 hours between the first 2 coats. She let it dry overnight and then applied the third. She sanded with 220 between all coats except after the final. After cleaning the pulls, she painted them in 2 different shades of gold. The first one was a more gray gold, and the second was a traditional brass color. It gave them a unique color by combining the 2 different colors. So here's the finished product. I love it. I love the really rich, deep color and the beautiful brass hardware. I think it turned out excellent. I loved her staging. She had a beautiful silk drape, kind of draped to the side of her piece, and then a gilded mirror. I think it really embodied the Old World Opulence. So join me in congratulating Darlene for winning the Old World Opulence Furniture Challenge. Thanks so much for watching.